Over the course of this year in geometry, we've talked about the relationships between lines or line segments in each other. For instance, two lines can be parallel to each other, they can be perpendicular to each other, maybe one line segment bisects another line segment. We've been able to talk about these things in the Euclidean plane. And now that we're starting to remind ourselves a little bit of how the coordinate plane works with the coordinates and slopes and things like that, now we can go back and look at parallel and perpendicular lines and see what more we can say about them once we throw in these concepts of coordinates and slopes and things like that. Let's pop over to GeoGebra and see an example. So here I've got a line on the grid. And quick quiz, what's the slope of this line? Well, to go from point A to point B, we're going to go up 2 and over 1. Up 2 over 1. Positive 2 over 1. So the slope of this line is positive 2 over 1, or we could just say 2 if we wanted to. All right, let me do a fun thing, which is why I love GeoGebra. I'll just add an extra point here. And now I will construct a line that's parallel to this line that goes through point C. All right, now that I've done that, what's the slope of that new line I just drew? Is it obvious to calculate? And if you go and do it the same way we just did it, what would your answer be? Well, if we created an extra grid point right there, it's the same thing. We're going up 2 over 1 again. So the slope of this line is also positive 2 over 1, or just 2. Does it seem obvious looking at these two parallel lines that their slopes would be the same? How would you explain that in your own words to someone who hadn't thought about it yet? Could you give them an explanation in a way that would be convincing to them? That's one of the key ideas that I like driving us towards in geometry. The notion that if you have an idea that's fresh in your mind, can you use your words and your persuasive abilities in order to convince somebody else of that fact? It's one of the key ideas of humanity. Not necessarily a math idea that you have. You could have any idea, but you need to be able to effectively communicate it in order for your idea to really have traction and change the world. In this case, I guess the words I would use is if you've got two parallel lines, they're kind of going in the same direction, aren't they? And slope is just a way of talking about how steep a line is. So if two lines are going in the same direction, they got to be equally steep. If one was steeper than the other, they would cross each other somewhere. But since they have the same steepness, they're going to have the same slope. So what we see here is that two parallel lines have to have the same slope. That's a pretty cool concept. We're going to use it in the future. In the next video, we're going to take a look at perpendicular lines. Now that isn't quite as easy. The slopes aren't equal to each other, but we're going to be able to find a relationship between them all the same.